This is the 2020 Mazda MX-5 Club Edition. After 30 years in the marketplace, does the MX-5 still have what it takes to be the answer? We're gonna find out. We are gonna take it to the firm, the Florida International Rally and Motorsports Park, the official test track of Grassroots Motorsports, give it a few laps there and see how it does. It's gonna be particularly interesting to compare because the previous week, we got the chance to drive a Toyota 86 out there. So comparing two market competitors back to back on track is gonna be very, very interesting. I wanna be excited because it's a Miata, or sorry, MX-5. And that comes with certain emotional baggage and just knowledge of what this car is and what this car represents. But at the same time, we had a car here recently that didn't have the most aggressive tires on it. There was a sporty car, which was the new Toyota 86. And it had a much more direct feel and a much more quick to react chassis than this does. I found myself having to turn in extremely early in spots. Part of it is because there's a lot of body roll. So the chassis takes quite a bit of time to actually fully load the tires and develop maximum grip because things just happen very, very slowly. And part of it is, what ends up happening is it feels like the whole chassis is just sort of riding up on the tippy toes of the tires. And you know, it feels like an old British sports car with narrow tires that are just sort of hanging on by their fingertips. Doesn't give you a confident, planted feel the way the 86 did. Now that said, once it finally does take a set, which takes a while, it's a fairly neutral set. Although you still don't feel like you have a lot of feedback as to what that set is doing. It's just after going through the same corner different ways a few times, you realize, okay, this is fairly neutrally balanced. The car is not telling you all those things. But what it really all sort of feels like to me is there's a great package in here that was not delivered from the factory. This is a car that's begging to be, 20% stiffer, 20% lower, have a much grippier tire on it. I can totally see why so many people have had such success and such fun in like street touring autocross classes and now into street prepared autocross classes, because there's an amazing car hiding in here that is not really revealed in stock form on the track. Now the brakes are pretty good. They're these big Brembo brakes that come with the club package. Pretty good. There was some initial fade after the first couple laps. You didn't get that hard bite that you got on the outlap or the second lap. But once that initial fade period was over, the brakes were very consistent after that. So they sort of settled into a track mode. And I finally started after a few laps because the chassis was always so on edge and taking so long to set. I really loosened my grip on the wheel and just sort of started fingertip steering and trying not to put any more commands into the chassis than I thought were necessary to really try and reduce the amount to make a more favorable signal to noise ratio for what I was doing and trying to make the car to do. It's interesting that we were here a week ago with the Toyota 86. I want to take that phenomenal reactive communicative chassis of the 86 and put this gem of a motor and shifter in it. And the 86's shifter is phenomenal. This one's even better. So between the two, there's a perfect car waiting to be born. That chassis and this motor. So yeah, a lot to like here, but more in the I sense potential here rather than there is inherent excitement in what I'm sitting in right now. Those are my subjective opinions coming off a track, but let's see what story the data tells, because that's going to tell me if I'm way off base here, or if I'm right, or if some of what I'm sensing is real or not. So we'll take a look at the Apex Pro data, see what that tells us. So I have an interesting thing going on here because we have a lap from the MX-5 and we have a lap from the previous week with the Toyota 86. I want to bring that lap in because it's impossible not to compare the cars back to back. And I'm actually not going to take the best lap from the 86, but I'm going to take a lap that oddly enough is identical in time, a 1 minute 27.51 second lap from each car. So we can see the Toyota speed traces and G traces are in red, and the Mazdas are in blue. And what I want to look at is how they're getting to these lap times, because the lap times across the board were actually very similar. Driving the Mazda, it really felt like it was taking a very long time to change directions. It felt like it took just forever to build G-forces once you made you initiated a direction change, and the 86 didn't feel like that. So I want to go to a corner near the end here, and I just want to see sort of how quickly each car gets to maximum lateral G. And it's interesting because as we scroll through here, we can see both cars going from braking up to you know, nearly 1 G in a right hand corner, 0.9 G. Surprisingly enough, the Mazda does a pretty good job at building those lateral Gs very quickly. So, in that the car actually develops some lateral grip pretty quickly, but then continues to roll and continues to make you feel like, things haven't really settled yet. But so let's now take a look at where things are different on track. We'll bring the track map up here, and we'll take a look at our speed trace up on top and see what we can see is different. Well, the first thing I see is that, interestingly enough, although the engines feel completely different, they feel like they're just two engines of very differing characters, our acceleration graphs are actually very, very similar. Let's look at this one here. We're going from the slowest corner on track, which is the right-hand hairpin, and we're accelerating up towards this left-hand sweeper here. And you can see the acceleration curves are really, really similar, even though they don't feel that similar. You can see the little pause there where the 86, you're shifting from third to fourth, whereas it looks like in the Mazda, we shifted from second to third pretty early coming out and just held third all the way down. But those acceleration curves, for two cars that feel very, very different, those acceleration curves look shockingly similar. All right, let's look at a couple of corners that look different here. We'll see what we can learn about them. We'll scroll back to this corner here. And so, yeah, what's going on here is we can definitely see some of the slow transitional nature of the MX-5, that blue trace. You can see how the speed of the blue trace drops a little bit and then braking is initiated, whereas the 86 just continues to accelerate and then immediately goes into braking. That drop in acceleration with the blue trace of the MX-5 is basically coming off the throttle, letting the chassis settle a little bit, actually getting back into the throttle a little bit because the car is moving around so much, you're having a hard time making a decision, and then getting on the brake. And then as you progress through this right-hand corner here, we can see the minimum cornering speed of the MX-5 quite a bit slower than the minimum cornering speed of the 86, just because it was so imprecise going through there. But the braking traces look very, very similar. The acceleration curves, like I say, look shockingly similar, considering how different the engines are. And we'll go over to our sweeper here. We can see that, you know, except for a couple little adjustments here, our speed through the big left-hand sweeper, very similar for both cars. So although the MX-5 feels very different on track than the 86, they're both ultimately doing very, very similar things, which I'm a little surprised. The 86 is doing it in a much more composed, much more communicative way. The MX-5 is still managing to do it, but not really telling the driver as much about what it's doing while it's happening. So if the MX-5 is a little bit of a letdown on track, it's a much nicer place to do business on the road. It's a little soft on track, but that softness translates into a pretty comfortable ride on the road, and you sit up a little bit too high for a modern sports car. In my opinion, I like to be a little more in the car. But the upside of that is you actually have pretty nice sight lines out of the car, even for a fairly tightly confined convertible like this. It's comfortable. It's friendly. The shifter is, as we said on track, very nice, very responsive, very easy to use. It's just tricky to wrap my head around the fact that the MX-5 used to be the iconic world standard for what defined a low-cost, affordable sports car that you could grow with, you could buy as a fun car and go racing with or go autocrossing with at any level you wanted to. And that's not the case anymore. It's got a lot of competition from a lot of different angles. And on one level, that's cool because that's more choices for the enthusiast. But on the other hand, it's a little odd seeing such a powerhouse finally face some adversity in the marketplace. And the question ultimately is, do you want this car? Is Miata still the answer as it has been for so long? Well, the real answer to that, I think, is it may not be the answer anymore, but it's an answer. First off, this top goes down. The same cannot be said for the Toyota 86. And yeah, this is still a fantastic chassis. It's still a great platform, and it's still a fairly unique thing, except for its essentially twin in the Fiat 124. It's still a fairly unique thing in the world, an affordable two-seat sports car that's actually good at what it does, even though I've picked a few nits with it today. So, do you want it? If you do, you know you want it, and I'm not going to talk you out of it. And if you do get it, you're getting a very, very high quality, very capable automobile. Just because I can criticize a few of the things it does, just because I don't think this car has lost a step, but I think its competition has gained some steps over the years, just because it doesn't sit absolutely on top of the heap unquestioningly the way it used to, doesn't mean it's still not a fantastic car. Thanks to Mazda for letting us take a look at the 2020 MX-5 this week, and thanks to the firm for being the official test track of Grassroots Motorsports magazine. If you're enjoying all the track tests we do, all the content we do on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, all the stuff the social media folks ask you to do, and check us out on the web at grassrootsmotorsports.com.
Support brands that support Grassroots Motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.